I think it's a question that you're asking, but I think the majority of people are asking it. Aren't we supposed to die? Isn't that what being a Homo sapiens sapien is all about? Doesn't death give meaning to life? What are we if we're going to not die? What is that? How is that going to disrupt um, the existence of the human?
Welcome back, everybody. We are joined today by Dr. Natasha Vita-More. She's a former professor and department chair at UAT and current distinguished senior fellow at the Center for Future Mind at FAU. She's one of the foremost thinkers on healthy longevity and has made numerous contributions to the field and movement. And if you stick around, she'll tell you how to live forever. Natasha, welcome. We're so happy to have you here today.
You're going to be telling me how to live together forever, right? Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course, this is going to be such an exciting conversation. I know there's a lot of people out there who are interested in longevity and especially doing it in a sort of healthy way. I know there's a lot of snake oil type out there that'll tell you do this and you'll live forever, and it's all nonsense. So trying to do it in the good, sustainable, healthy way is awesome, and I'm just so excited to have this conversation.
Thank you.
You want to tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the longevity space, because it's certainly an interesting field to get into.
Yeah, it's how each person all of a sudden wakes up one day and goes, "Wait a minute, I'm dying. My body's aging, and I want to live longer because I'm passionate about life, or I have a lot to do, and I really want to be around in a healthy way to do that." And I think that my wake up call was, you know, earlier on than many people, but certainly a lot of people just from childhood want to live a long, healthy life. But for me specifically, it started in the early 1980s. But what really got me interested in the movement was having co-hosted and co-chaired a conference. And I have to say, this is probably one of the very first conferences on longevity. And it was produced by just a handful of us. And it was located at the University of California in Berkeley. And that conference had some of the most exquisite forefront thinkers and scientists, entrepreneurs and advocates of longevity. And that conference really stands out to me because we have so many conferences today. Almost every week there's another conference on longevity. And I'm very I guess proud that I was part of the team that put on this conference at Berkeley. It was, again, renowned scientists, entrepreneurs, and I think what it did was it helped set the pace for this entire longevity industry that we see today that is raising billions of dollars for looking at cures to aging and prolonging healthy life.
So I'm wondering, where do you think it's going? Like, do you think that there's a path here, or do you think like we're just sort of faking it till we make it? And like where do you see this? How do you see it playing out?
I see it playing out this way. I think there is going to be, as Jason said, snake oil. There is going to be a lot of slippery slopes, rabbit holes, straw man arguments. There's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to get in the way of really taking a look at the aging process. And I think that what a lot of people are not taking into consideration is that the human biology is an exceedingly complex engineered system, and we've only been able to look at the outside of it until we were able to look at genomics and look at our DNA, and then we found out about proteinomics, and then we learned that it's not just in the proteins or in the DNA or in your genes, it's in the messaging system and what's being delivered, what can turn on and what can turn off and what can just sit there for a lifespan. Most of us carry cancerous genes in our bodies or cancerous potential circumstances. But if it gets turned on and we get a cancerous disease or not depends largely on that messaging system, which depends largely on our lifestyle. So what we're finding is that epigenetics has more swag and more sway than we thought it ever had before, because 10 years ago, I thought about epigenetics and I thought maybe a little bit of pseudoscience, but not so. I'm one of the first to admit that I was wrong, that epigenetics does play a big part. Now, I have to have a caveat here to say that I've always been an athletic person. I've always tried to eat healthy. I know sleep is exceedingly important, and community of friends or loved ones, people who respect you and want to engage with you, is very important. So those four particular qualifiers and quantifiers for healthy longevity are essential, and it ties into epigenetics. But it's pretty much common sense, isn't it? We just didn't know what big role it played until we learned about the messaging system, that these particular genes that mutate can be turned on or off. So lifestyle is very important. What can we do today to answer the question, what's on the horizon? There's a lot on the horizon, and it's exceedingly exciting. We do need to be careful about the multitude of longevity conferences where people are selling products. Now, it's great that at most of these conferences, there are pitch sessions where people will come up and pitch their new endeavor, their entrepreneurial project, their new product, their new way of looking at longevity. That is great because it builds the entrepreneurial sector, and it also brings in money, which is much needed. However, we need to really learn how to ask questions to maybe not come off as a dilettante or maybe come off as too much of a scientism expert, but more common sense. Critical thinking, I think, is one of the most important factors we need today. So visionary thinking with looking at new protocols and methodologies for intervening with biomedical methodologies and protocols being used today, but also to question when someone's saying, I have this new product and I have gene therapy, or I can do this with stem cells. How do you do it? What are your methods? Do you own the company? What investment do you have in the company? And once we uncover that and there's more transparency, we can take a better look at it. So I think that what's on the horizon largely is nanomedicine. And it's not just nanomedicine, because we do have that today. We do have biomedical interventions that are looking on the molecular scale vis-a-vis DNA and the messaging systems within proteomics and the enzymes, etc. However, nanorobotics, I think, will be the biggest phase or the biggest shift in longevity, because it would act in concert with the body, with our biology. It would act as a biocompatible agent. And I want to explain this to your audience just so I make a little sense here. The human body has never been 100% human. It's never been 100% human DNA. We've always existed with a minor organelle called ATP, but it's major for us because it creates the energy in our bodies. So we cannot exist without mitochondria. It's the energy making, the ATP making agency in our body. If we have other types of non-human biological mechanisms that work with the body to help repair the damage from aging or the damage from disease and inflammation, etc., that would be very, very good for us. So in that regard, I look at and I study and I pay attention to nanorobotics. Nanorobotics would be tiny, tiny nanoscale systems, like little machines that would go into the body, much like a vaccine or an eye drop or a nose spray or a pill. And it would be directed to go to a specific area of the body to do repair work. And then once it has done its repair work, you could sneeze it out, cry it out, urine it out, or however it would come out, or sweat it out. So I think that that would be one of the best advances in biomedical intervention for healthy longevity, and we need it. Our bodies, as great as they are, and as much as I love my body, it is failing because it is aging and it's programmed to age. Our cells can only duplicate or split, called daughter cells, so many times before they wear out, and then they become junk cells, and they accumulate in our bodies as junk. Now, some of this is not so bad, some of it is really bad, and then we have what is called like vampire cells that are zombie cells that stay in the body, and they clog up arteries, they clog up the flow of the energy throughout our bodies to give us that efficiency we need. So I think nanorobotics and nanomedicine is the area to pay attention to. The other area that I think is on the cutting edge and the horizon is cryobiology. Now, there's not much paid to cryobiology outside the realms of in vitro fertilization, or if we look back in the 1970s, in 1974, the first test tube baby was conceived and born. And that was considered at the time to be science fiction, the not a human thing, totally immoral and unethical. And it was, I mean, it hit the cover of so many magazines and newspapers because it was considered so awful, Frankenstein type of stuff. But today, and this is, based on statistics, based on facts by, the World Health Organization and other organizations that look at the percentages and statistics of health and longevity. Between 5 and 6 million people today are among us on our beautiful planet who were conceived in a petri dish. Now that is amazing. And that isn't a long span between the 1970s and today that we would switch our thinking. So a lot of healthy longevity depends on our psychology and what I call outdated myths. So mythology has played a big part in what we can see as unethical or too far, reaching too far, imagining too much. And it brings in the myths of Icarus and Perseus and Pandora's box and just the Prometheus, and just the awful myths that if you go too far, you tamper with God's laws on the, nature and the body, that something bad or something awful is going to happen. Well, we know that's not true. We know that patients, especially children with Tay-Sachs and sickle cell anemia, adults with multiple sclerosis and ALS and Alzheimer's and other types of dementia are being cured, or at least it's being allayed to a degree, and this is really good. We don't want our species, our fellow humans to suffer unnecessarily.
I wanted to ask a quick follow-up question on nanorobotics and their role in longevity. Like, what do you imagine, which systems would they interact with? Like, I don't know how they're actually using the nanorobotics to influence your body in some way. Is it interacting with the mitochondria? Is it interacting with your, like, the cells? How does it work?
All right. First, let me say that we don't have nanorobotics yet, but it's in the process. Robert Freitas is the world's expert on nanomedicine and nanorobotics, and Ralph Merkle, and they are making headway. And Robert Freitas's book just came out I think in late 2023, it's on biocompatible nanorobotics. But we know that the advances in artificial intelligence is growing, accelerating by leaps and bounds. And we know that robotics is accelerating by leaps and bounds. So you put those two together on a nanoscale, and we already know that we can write a script of a story on the head of a pin on a molecular scale. And there's so much being done on the molecular scale. So the next step would be nanorobotics. Okay, so specifically, how would the nanorobotics interact with the different organs and cellular structures of the human body? Well, it would be directed much like, I guess an analogy here would be stem cells. Stem cells are injected into the body to go to a specific area of the body to help clean up or cure certain ailments. right? Sometimes they falter because they go to wherever there's a problem in the body, maybe not if you have a problem in your knee, but you also have a problem in your wrist, it might go to your wrist and not your knee. So they need to be programmed better. So artificial intelligence is really streamlining the information and data entry points for that intervention. So if you have, say, liver disease and your liver needs to be cleaned up and worked on, the nanorobots would go into the body and be directed, programmed to go to the liver, for example, and repair the cells on the molecular scale. So that's down into the cell membrane and inside the cell on that molecular level. Um, Bone replacement. We see a lot of people today with spinal problems. In fact, almost everyone I know complains about their hip or their back aching or their knees. And if you're athletic, then those are areas that are usually hit first. It's the knees and the back and the wrists. So nanorobotics could go into the body and go to those areas and build up the structure of the bone and the joints and the ligaments to make them more finessed and to work better. And to answer one of your questions, yes, indeed, it could work with the mitochondria, because if our mitochondria is ill and aging and degenerating, we need our mitochondria to be as healthy as every other cell or structure in our body. So mitochondria is a big field in healthy longevity that needs to be addressed, because we don't know how much it affects us, but certainly it would affect us in large ways if it is supplying our energy, and we need energy to exist.
Yeah, that makes sense. We just had a guest on who had talked a lot about mitochondria, and yeah, it'd be interesting to connect you to us, because I think you'd have some really fascinating conversations.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
So when we think about the body's biological aging, is there more to it than just kind of the cells breaking down? I know you mentioned the messaging systems also breaking down. Uh, is the idea behind a lot of longevity trying to promote the growth of new healthy cells?
Yes, I think so. To repair the damage of the cells as they weaken and they lose their tenacity and efficacy, to be sure. There's entropy is all around us. We see it in every area of life forms. There's the breakdown and degeneration. So yes, it would be to repair and to restructure, but also there's a whole nother area here that I think we ought to talk about. That's artificial cells and artificial organs and artificial body parts. We've seen great advances with the cochlear implant. We've seen great advances with knee replacement therapy. Consider the number of people who have prosthetic limbs, arms and legs and whatnot, and the organ transplants. They need to be biocompatible, to be sure, but and we're looking at pig parts for the human because they're the most compatible. But if you could vitrify your own organs and grow your own organs that would be biocompatible, that would be probably a good choice. In light of the growing number of people who need transplants on a daily basis, just in the United States alone, it's hundreds of thousands of people. And that's just one country. We don't have the statistics of everywhere in the world, but due to wars and disease and breakdowns and the high rate of diabetes and heart disease and all the diseases that are not just endemic to the United States, but everywhere in the world are following suit with, again, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, etc. It's a growing phenomena. I don't know whether it's an epidemic, but it certainly looks like one. So why is this happening? It's the quality of food that we're eating is filled with preservatives, and it's a lot of the fatty foods, the bad fats, the perpetual habit of feeding our face when we're unhappy, and the level of loneliness and unhappiness is also growing. So it's not just the epigenetics and the healthy lifestyle to live. It's taking a look at why are so many people feeling lonely and depressed when we have such an array of social media everywhere, and you connect with people anywhere, anytime, 24/7. So why is this? And it makes you wonder about what is going on with the human brain, and why isn't it evolving at the rate of technology? And that's where my work comes in the philosophical worldview that I am deeply ingrained in. It's looking at why haven't we become more enlightened, more aware, more mindful when we have so much? And going back to the 1970s and 60s, remember all the self-help books? I mean, it was an incredible movement for self-help. And more and more people are admitting to depression or alcoholism or drug addiction, or their different interpersonal behavioral challenges. So it's not like people are isolated. We're not. So I think that's something else in the longevity field for us to really pay attention to, is the psychology of the human mind, and why is this going on today? So it ties into that healthy lifestyle. And I think one of the most important elements in living a healthy lifestyle is to surround yourself with positive people, people who truly respect you and admire you, and who you respect and admire. It's got to be a quid pro quo. It's got to be reciprocity. It must be that if you loving other people is a great thing to do for yourself, if we're going to be selfish about it, but it's also a great thing to do for others. It's like a need finding. It's a wonderful thing to do on a daily basis. And also, I do a lot of landscaping, so I love to go in my garden and work the soil. These healthy things to do, like walking, enjoying the sunsets, enjoying the world around us, is so vastly important, and it's part of my daily routine. So I think that um, I wanted to look here at my note. So I think that what we really need to focus is on putting our egos outside. One thing I'm concerned about in the longevity industry is the rate of entrepreneurs, which is great, and the rise in the investment, which is so much needed. But we need to, it's an old saying, leave your ego on the hat rack before you come in the room. It's not about any one person being a leader. There are no leaders in longevity. Every person is the leader of their own body and mind and beingness. And so if you want to live a healthy life, then it's up to you to practice self-responsibility and fortitude, and I guess accountability would be one of the most important. Watch what you eat, exercise, do what you do, and pay it forward. Help other people do the same, rather than meeting people to make money or to promote your thing. So I would love to see the longevity industry become more mindful, um, and less competitive and looking for who's the leader. There are no leaders. Everyone who does something beneficial or walks the walk is a leader.
I really like that, because it's like there's no one size fits all solution to anybody, and you kind of need to figure out where you're at and what you need, and know the options available to you, which is, that's the hardest part for me right now, is I'm trying to figure out what are the options, and which are the good options, and which are the good options that are right for me. And so I've been
Absolutely.
doing having a lot of conversations and asking questions and showing up and saying dumb things, but then over
No,
time I'm
no,
learning.
no, that's great. It's great. I think one of the best things is, as far as keen intelligence and wisdom, is to say, I don't know, can you educate me? Can you show me? And then I'll make my decision. Or I don't know, or I did this wrong, how can I do it better? I think those phrases are signs of a mature, wise person, rather than someone pontificating on what he or she or they or them are doing. But I have a lot of people say to me, well, aren't you taking metformin? Why aren't you taking this? Why aren't you taking? I can't. It doesn't work for my body. And when people say, or pontificating on the latest um, protocol or therapy that you're supposed to be doing, that everyone's doing, that maybe David Sinclair is saying everyone should do, or whoever is the current voice of longevity. No, test it out for yourself. Uh, I remember there used to be human growth hormone. Everyone was trying to get human growth hormone years ago. But if you were someone who's had cancer, you ought not to take it because it could cause your cancer to not only come back, but your those messaging systems to turn on. So you don't want to do it. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of follow the leader. There's a lot of people following whoever they think is the know-it-all of healthy longevity. And mind you, there are some very smart clinics. One of my favorite clinics is run by Joanna Benz in Warsaw, Poland, and she also has a few other clinics. And it's called the Longevity Center, and it is beautifully done, and they're doing excellent work. And so I would put that on my high level of who to pay attention to. Another one is the Buck Institute in Northern California. And I love Eric's work there. I love everything he's doing. I think he's really an honest person who's not trying to make money or promote a business out of it. He's just looking at bringing people together who have a level of expertise and wisdom and ask good questions. So there's another one is I support cryobiology very much. So I look at, there's a group called Biostasis Technologies that are looking at the cutting edge technology in biostasis, which is a term used intermittently with cryonics within the field of cryobiology. But remember, cryobiology is a very important field, and it ought to get more attention because of the first infertility. We vitrify, people say freeze, but the real term is vitrify. We vitrify eggs and sperm and embryos. Soon we'll be vitrifying, let's see, or freezing or preserving, I think maybe the best term to use, preserving organs and for transplants, those hundreds of thousands of people waiting for someone to die so they can get a transplant. It's better to have these preserved like in a bank where you can get them when you need them. So we all need to be thinking ahead about our own aging and what is happening in our bodies. But again, to practice those four essentials, and again, most importantly out of them is the community of people. I've been through so many experiences where people will befriend me and then they compliment me a lot. Oh, Natasha, you've done this and this, and you know, uh, just flattery, and it's love to hear. It's wonderful to hear people remind you of the good things that you've done in the world. But be cautious. I have had people do that, then just want a connection from me or money from me or something, and then it's all about them. So I think that it's hard to do, but I think we all need to be mindful and make sure that our community is surrounded by people who really are good, solid people that are not going to, be disrespectful to us. Um, and this ties into an area that I spent a lot of my life involved in before I became involved in science and technology of longevity. And it dates back to in my earlier lifespan, when I was very involved in the performing arts. I was thinking about this before our conversation and wondered how this influenced me to where I am today. And I attribute it to to video largely and filmmaking. And I loved making videos and films. And it was really a platform for espousing more prose than poetry, but stories about life and not only my own circumstances, but the world as I saw it. And I wrote and performed in a video that got first place at Women in Video, and I think it was 1989, and it was called Two Women in B&W. And we were dressed androgynously, and we were talking about gender identification long before it became popular. And it was repeating same lines over and over with different personas. And what it was saying is that we always will have a voice in our heads that will say, oh, do this or don't do that. And as we're trying to practice healthy longevity, they'll be the one that says, oh, get the French fry or don't get the French fry. But sometimes we do need to reward ourselves with something we love, whether it's a French fry or working in your garden. Make sure that you do that, because there are certain satisfactions that come with doing something we love. And I love making videos, and I haven't done it for a while, but it's really, something that each one of us needs to think about, where we were at our most joyful times in life, in doing what is at the core of our own persona, our own sensibility. And in doing this, I was thinking about all the different museums I've exhibited in and been a part of, from Brooks Memorial Museum in the United States to the London Museum in the United Kingdom, to the Moscow Museum of Art in Moscow, to the Venland Museum in Norway. And I'm on the list to be at the Louvre Museum in Paris at the end of this year. And those moments are special to me, not because they're just museums, but because of the sentimentality of what the museum offers. And the museum offers not just the visuals or the spoken word or the film or the video or the sculpture. It's the narrative, the story of humanity. And that's what I love so much about the museum. It's a place to go to remember the great creative, not just creative, but even scientific and technological advances that humanity has been involved in for eons, historically, going back to the most ancient of times, and even, the earliest writing on stone. To I think the core of stories, why are we here? Why do we want healthy longevity? Why is it important to us? And that brings me to why I think philosophy is more important today than probably since Socrates or Plato or Aristotle or any of the great women philosophers during that time that are seldom mentioned. But the the search for truth, number one, the search for why we're here, existence, and that's a question that's being asked everywhere. What does it mean to be human when we're looking at AI and how we could evolve? Why are we here? Will we become transhumans or cyborgs or avatars or upload? Or what is our future? And what do we need to hold on to so near and dear? I think that our biological bodies ought to be preserved and taken care of. I think that's our responsibility, because without our bodies, our minds are going to falter. And what are we without our minds? Our brain is our single one most important organ. Some would debate me on that, but it is an important organ to nurture and to exercise. So in that mind is being mindful, acquiring wisdom and knowledge and information, a sensing when right and wrong, but above all, just having a love for life because it's precious. So it's interesting in looking at where humanity is headed and why I support the philosophy of transhumanism in that regard, because I think it is looking straight on at these questions.
So you were talking, especially about the philosophical piece. Question popped into my head. Very philosophical question. That is dying a part of being human? And if you are able to stop humans from dying, are they still humans?
That is a really great question. Thank you, Jason. I think it's a question that you're asking, but I think the majority of people are asking it. Aren't we supposed to die? Isn't that what being a Homo sapiens sapien is all about? Doesn't death give meaning to life? What are we if we're going to not die? What is that? How is that going to disrupt the existence of the human? The way I answer that is thusly. The human is a Homo sapien, to be sure. It's a hominin, and it stems from a trail of evolution of hominids. And we look at the Australopithecus, which were our earliest hominids, and the biped, which was around that time when we started walking, and then the Neanderthal, and then there was the Homo erectus, and then there were different branches of our hominin species, many of which died off. And it was the survival of the Homo sapien, which became the human, that succeeded. It succeeded largely because of the frontal lobe in our language, communication, our fight or flight in our brain stem or reptilian brain, and our ability to survive, to fight, to take action, and to solve problems. And in the myth that Prometheus gave the humans fire, and therefore Prometheus had to suffer for eternity, is usually the warning sign that many use in as a comparison or a metaphor for AI. Don't tamper with it, or you'll be, eaten by crows in your liver for eternity, like Prometheus. However, no, I don't think it's part of our species. In fact, I think our species largely was to reproduce. And I think that Richard Dawkins was absolutely correct when he wrote about the selfish gene. Our species need to populate, but we've populated enough, and we even, some say, overpopulated, which is proving to be a miscalculation because population decline is now the current existential risk, since many countries are declining in birth rates, etc. That's another conversation, but a very, very interesting one. I think that with our brains, with our frontal lobe, with the aid of technology, to be sure, for the fire to AI, that one of our key purposes in life is to solve problems, to survive and solve problems. So solving problems, looking at the dangers and the consequences, and how we've used ingenuity, imagination, vision, problem solving to overcome the problems. And I think that is endemic and innate to being human. Maybe not the Australopithecus or the early biped or the Neanderthal. Maybe for the Homo sapien, it changed with our evolution and our survival of our species to where we are today, that death is no longer a necessity. It's no longer needed since we were able to unravel our DNA. We were able to understand proteinomics. We were able to understand the mechanisms within the body that deliver the messages back and forth and are constantly repairing and working in our body themselves. And the fact that we are not solo as humans, we evolved with mitochondria, that maybe we can evolve with another different artificial life form, meaning AI, to repair. Now, it's not saying that you have to live forever. Perhaps the definition of death will change. We've already seen it change over hundreds of years. People were considered dead when they were in a coma. We learned that many people came out of the coma and were ringing the bell outside their grave saying, "Let me out of here." And there's many pictures of that in encyclopedias to show those stories, which are phenomenal. And we can laugh at it, but could you imagine how awful? But a lot of people were considered dead after a heart attack. Now we bring back people who've had a heart attack through defibrillators, through different protocols, and we're able to save lives that once would have been dead 50 years ago, 100 years ago, if not far longer ago. So we're able to cure through surgeries and interventions, and those biomedical interventions saving lives have only brought people pretty much joy. Doctor, do everything you can. Save my husband, save my child, save my wife. And when they're saved from death, we applaud it. We say it's a miracle. It's biomedical intervention and human ingenuity. So I think that can only lead. I'm not someone who says or ever suggest that one should live forever indefinitely without any death. I think that, again, people, if they want to die, that's their freedom of choice. But if you want to live longer, that's your choice. And it ought to be a freedom of choice, and it ought to be ownership. You own your body, you own your brain, you own your mind, you own your identity. And no government or regulation ought to ever intervene and tell a person that she, he, they, or them must die because it's the belief system of the majority of people.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up here, maybe you can tell us what the future holds for you and what you're working on these days, and how we and the listeners can either follow along or support you.
Okay, great. I don't know what I'm working on. No, what I'm working on. Okay, so after I had my one and only scientific breakthrough, but it's many people never get a scientific breakthrough, and I worked hard on it. I spent a decade thinking about it, and a year in the lab with my teammate, Dr. Danielle Baracco from Seville, Spain, and we worked hard and we did achieve a scientific breakthrough. And I'm very delighted at that, but I have no desire to go back in a lab and do that. Although I am very interested in working with neurons and memory to continue my work in long-term memory, but short-term memory per se, but through probably different protocols. I'm focused on creating what I call the H plus zone. Now, you've all heard of the blue zones, right? Yes, I think everyone today has heard of the blue zones, and they're fantastic. But that, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that term blue zone is trademarked by the Seventh Day Adventists. And so you can't have a blue zone called a blue zone unless you meet their particular requirements, which is fine if that's your choice. But I like to think of a humanity plus zone, where humanity can aspire to be the best it can be at this point as we're striving to improve and grow and learn. So I'm working on the H plus zone, which is based on those four very basic principles, but looking at the latest science and technology and having debates, critical thinking, and to bring individuals in their respective fields together to argue positively, to debate, to find the best solutions to the problems that we're facing. So that's one project I'm working on. I'm looking over here to see if I have another project. I'm writing brief stories that will become short little videos on new myths. I think we need new myths. The old myths, as I said earlier on, are so outdated and they just cause fear amongst people. And they kind of have this, they're like an albatross, better not do that because something bad's going to happen. If I achieve too much or I have too much happiness, the devil's watching is going to get me. It's like the olden days where you didn't show anyone that you were happy because the devil would get you. I think we need to be more exuberant about smiling and playing and spreading joy. And we don't have to do it 24/7. I'm not an hedonist, and I love philosopher Dave Pearce's hedonistic imperative and happiness. But I think sadness is okay. I don't mind crying at a sad movie. I mean, The Notebook will get me every time. So, but I think that we need to learn how to just enjoy life. We all work so hard. The other thing is, I really support a phrase called existential opportunity. It's a phrase Max Moore came up with, my husband. And I really, really love it because everyone's so involved in existential risk. We need to find opportunities that are so important and necessary to our lives. What is on a daily basis? What can you turn into an opportunity? And so I think that being positive is important, but I think it's beyond being positive. I think it's a combination of being mindful in practicing these principles on a daily basis, but to try to take our species to the next level, which is wisdom, not perfection. No, 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 no. I'm down on perfection. There's no such thing as perfection. It's a dead end. I'm very focused on gaining more momentum and sensibility about life and setting an example and catching myself when I do something that I'm not proud of and doing my best to admit it straight on and take responsibility for it and to try to maybe I'm not going to help so many people anymore after I've been some people are, just want to take, but I think that I will always and forever, as an academic, want to help spread information and educate. And so I continue to make that my goal. So stories, videos, and speaking up at conferences for more women, speaking at longevity conferences. Come on, guys. Let's get more women out there because there are plenty of women who can give talks. And just do it, you know?
I applaud your bias for action.
Agreed. Well, Natasha, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's a very, very enlightening conversation. There's some good stuff in there about how we can look after ourselves, even without the intervention of nanobots or drugs or anything to try and live longer, just improving some very somewhat simple things around your lifestyle can make a big difference. So I hope that some people get a lot of value out of those things. I know I certainly will. But yeah, thank you so much again for taking the time.
Thank you so much. You two are just charmers. Oh, wow. Cool
Thank you.
guys. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. Until next time, everybody, be well.